Good afternoon. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive, and I'm joined here by our Deputy County Executive, Ken Jenkins, our Director of Operations, Joan McDonald. Other members of our key executive team are County Attorney John Nona is with us, Chief of Staff Andrew Ferris, Steve Bass, who serves as our Intergovernmental Deputy for County Affairs, Catherine Chaffee, our Director of Communications, and so many others from our executive team up and down the line. We're also joined by the members of the Westchester County Board of Legislators, excuse me, led by Chairman Ben Boykin, Vice Chair Alfreda Williams, Majority Leader Catherine Parker, Majority Whip Mary Jane Shimsky, Legislators Terry Clemens, Legislator Catherine Borgia, who chairs the Committee on Budget and Appropriations, and I'm looking carefully to see, am I missing any other legislators? I'm happy to recognize those, and we're going to call on a couple of them before we're finished for our press conference today. We're here to sign into effect the 2019 budget for Westchester County, and the action taken by the Board of Legislators today completes the process that has been laid out since the budget began when we were submitted slightly over a month ago. The use of the veto pen is unnecessary in this case, so we will have an operative budget as of the next few minutes. There's many people to thank, and I know in a moment like this you'd rather get to the substance of the discussion, but we have to stop and make sure that we recognize people all across the board. On the executive branch side, a tremendous burden was carried by Larry Sewell. Gideon, are they here right now? Larry and Gideon, please stand up. I want you to stand up. I want you to see these two key people who have put the time and effort and energy into preparing this budget, going through numerous meetings in the executive branch side, and then being equally available to the legislators as different issues came up. They're smiling now. I think they're leaving. I think they're leaving early today too. I don't know. Did you give them authority to leave early today?
They can leave early today.
So either that or we'll all be over the Brazen Fox. But in any event, the hard work within the administration begins with each department preparing a budget submission. And so every single commissioner, there are some present and there are some elsewhere, who went through the process of doing this under the direction of Joan McDonald as Director of Operations, and her Deputy Director, Emily Saltzman, who is with us, was to start to review all these different issues. And as I've made the point more than once, we have made some changes in commissioner and department head positions from the prior administration, but we kept a lot of people from the prior administration. We kept the finance and the budget teams intact, and many other of the professionals. So they gave us a good professional analysis with one important difference. We invited them to look at their departments with a growth potential, not just a maintain or reduce reality. Now, we're not able to do all the things we'd like to do in this budget. We'll talk about the budget itself in a second, but those commissioners went through the process perhaps for the 7th or 10th time in their career, but for the first time with an opportunity to look at their departments creatively and to try to come back with some additional ideas and proposals. And it became Joan and her team's responsibility to winnow out through those things, negotiate to try to get as tight a budget as we could get on the expense side, and that's not an easy process to do. And the legislators showed great diligence over the last month trying to delve into those departments, each one at a time, to understand what the details are. I have been a legislator for a long time. I've been through many, many different budgets as a legislator. It's very difficult to understand how the numbers fall until you understand how the departments run, until you understand what their functions are, how they're staffed to perform those functions. And many of the legislators here today that were involved in the budget review process began their analysis of departments a long time ago. I'll note, because she's sitting right here, Mary Jane Shimsky has long looked at the departments that relate to infrastructure, DPW and others. And that is what is required over the course of a whole year. Not just the analysis of a budget and gross numbers when it comes budget time, but understanding how these departments are structured. Many of us, we are new in our executive authority now as we complete our first year. Some legislators here are new. We're all going to work through and grow the process together. But a note of thanks to Joan, her operational team, and all the commissioners, and led by the budget department and their work. And I'm going to personally lead in a round of applause for what you've done. Before we submitted the budget to the Board of Legislators, our senior management team met to talk about that. And the leading person in the senior management team with me is Ken Jenkins, the Deputy County Executive. I'm going to invite him to say a few words. John Nona, our county attorney, performs a legal function with us, but both John and Ken, as have I, have been Westchester County legislators and have been through the budget and analyzed it as legislators in past years and some different circumstances. I'm, kind of far enough out of the legislative process here to see a different process that the board goes through today than in my day. But their role and ability to help us pull together some of these things once the departments had reported was essential. At the level of the Board of Legislators, certainly the leadership team, and I want to cite, even though they're not here today, the Republicans who were part of the process. Whether they voted for the budget or not isn't the most essential factor. The most essential factor is that they engage in the process of self-governance. I have been in the minority. I have been in the majority in most every level of government. I've been the minority leader of this board prior to becoming chairman. And whether or not we agree on the final day, it's the interaction of all parties, all 17 members, that matter. So I appreciate the role that the Republicans have played, and I appreciate the role that the leadership of this board, the Democratic leadership, has played, and how they have worked through different issues, have led the process on adds and on deletes and on the substance of these things. In addition to the chairman and the leadership team that I just introduced, I want to thank again publicly Catherine Borgia for her work on the Budget and Appropriations Committee. It is the toughest committee of the Board of Legislators to have responsibility for. It is the most impactful committee, and to lead that committee through a budget process is like driving a car through getting flack on every side of you, and you come through the end of it and the car is still intact. So, Madam Chair, for your work on that board with your committee and the leadership of the board, we give you great thanks and applause. Generally speaking, this budget, being our first budget, comes in a reality that you've all reported on and discussed. We have some realities that we face in this county. We inherited a budgetary situation which for many years did not raise revenue sufficient to run the county government. I've said before, and I'll say it again, you cannot run this government with the level of mandated costs on a 2% tax increase, property tax increase every year. The $11 million that a 2% increase raises is insufficient to run the government as we have it structured, and the responsibilities of this government, 65% of which are mandated by the state. So we deal with a proximate reality. We have to stay within a tax cap. We have an electorate that would prefer that we never raise taxes, if not reduce taxes at every opportunity, because they feel the heavy burden of property taxes. And yet we have people who consume services that are essential, that they have to have a public bus to take them to their work, that they have to have social services deliver certain services to them because they're in need. And sometimes it's very difficult to correlate the need of the spending of the money if you yourself do not have that need. And I've often said, if you are not in jail, incarcerated, or on probation, having been incarcerated, you don't understand what the jail and what the probation departments are about in this county government. And if you don't get on a Beeline bus, you don't understand necessarily what the transportation is in this county. It's not your problem, but it is our responsibility to provide those services. And that's what this budget has to do, whether or not the individual consumes the service or not. And then there are services that we consume that are somewhat invisible. When the local government picks up your garbage and recyclables, you don't see the role of the county government in the process of its final disposal, but the county government has a significant role from the transfer station to either Charles Point or a MRF in terms of the removal of those things in our waste stream, and the role that the county government plays in the sewage treatment. I'm sure it's after lunch. Everybody doesn't mind talking about sewage. We're still well before dinner. But the bottom line is public health is ensured by proper disposal of sewage, and that's a problem of that's responsibility of county government as well. So when we sit down and we work with numbers, behind tax rates, are human beings and are services that are essential in the society. And that's the correlation I think that people have to make. When you write your headlines in print, when you have your lead in from the anchor desk to the reporter that's going to cover this story, remember that it's not just the tax rate, it's not just the total cost of government, it is the services of those that this government provides. And if you fail to give proper weight to the services, then it looks as if money is being spent irrelevantly, when in fact it treats sewerage, it incarcerates those who have to be incarcerated, and a host of other things. That is the essential part of what was accomplished here today, that for the next year we have a game plan for how this is going to be executed. Now, absent any additional forms of non-property tax revenue, we had limited revenue to work from in this budget. We had a $60 million budget to close, a gap to close. This budget closes that gap. We had much conversation over the proposal that was put forward by the administration to sell the county center parking lots to the Local Development Corporation. As I have said previously, I will say again, we have no intent to move forward on that proposal any sooner than July 1st. Why is July 1st the date? Because the state legislature will be in session between January 1st and July 1st. And we intend to discuss with our colleagues who represent us in Albany what forms of alternate non-property tax revenue are available to us. And if we can find sufficient revenue to balance this budget without having to make this transaction, we will not make this transaction. But the transaction is legal, and the transaction would be done in detail at the time that we would move forward on it. And at that point in time, we would discuss a host of issues that have been raised. Someone might say, well, what's the appraisal of the property? Appraisal of the property would be necessary at the time that we move forward on it. Someone would say, how are we going to handle the question of land alienation? We would have to take some action in the state legislature before they go out of session, and then that would have to be in place in order for us to move forward on the transaction. But the budget doesn't require, the budget passage does not require those things to be done. And if we're able to find those alternative revenues, and there are plenty of sources to find it from potentially, and we don't have to do the plan, then that would be, I think, an honorable solution to what we have, what we faced. But beyond the parking lot deal, I also want to make one other mention. There's been some discussion about what's happened in the past with other kinds of one-shot deals. I've decried one-shot deals. They're a bad idea. They're a bad fiscal idea, and I'm doing it. Why am I doing it? Because I don't have any other alternatives. The alternatives, we went through a month of discussing this with the intellect of the 17 legislators and their very good staff members to look for alternatives, and there was no clear alternative to how we'd find $23 million. So the reality of this is that this is a very different transaction were it to happen from proposals on the airport or elsewhere. Now, I know there are some voices that have said we should revisit the airport deal. Well, I said I would not take the airport deal and make it a part of the budgetary process, and I have honored that commitment. Anytime any individual legislator or any combination of legislators wants to discuss this deal in concept, I'm willing to discuss it with them. I have my concerns about it, but those who advocate for it should have that opportunity to discuss it. But it should be outside of the budgetary process so that we don't make a decision merely because it is budgetary in intent. By the way, if we do this parking lot arrangement, it's in July. It's not during the heart of the budget process. It gives time to be thoughtful and to make a decision as to what you think legislation should look like, not you must pass this budget, it must be balanced, and you must do this deal right now. So I draw a distinction between past conversations and this one, and certainly I can elaborate on that on Facebook, so I'll see you there if you want to go there. We could also talk about how the Jets actually won a game. That'll last for 1 week, but the Giants too, but the Giants will be back. I also want to highlight that as we have our conversations with our state legislators, no one should presume what the end result of that conversation is going to be. I've served in both the Assembly and the Senate. I've served alongside many of the current members, and they have every right to draw independent judgments, just as the members of the Board of Legislators do. I consider all 17 members of this board a friend of mine. We have met in a host of different contexts, not the least of which is coffee and conversation. And I wouldn't dream that any one of them would do anything automatically just because I asked it. We are colleagues. We talk through things together, and reasonable people can disagree. And I think anything we look to in the state legislature, we have to presume that they will analyze it, even as our friends, even as we attend events and meetings with them, they'll analyze it on their own basis of public policy. And we'll have to be persuasive if we think there's a revenue stream we could tap. Just as a reminder, what are some of those revenue streams? We've talked a lot about sales tax. There is, first of all, the possibility that the state will authorize internet sales taxation. The Supreme Court case was adjudicated last year that allows for that to happen. Enabling legislation will have to come from the state. If that does, we've had estimates that we will have a higher result of sales tax than we might have otherwise. And there were some folks who were critical of the numbers that we projected based on those projections. Perhaps if the internet sales tax comes through, that alone may cover any concerns they've had about the projections that we've made. There's the possibility that the state will authorize sports betting. New Jersey has done it already. It's been determined to be legal. And New York may jump into that pool. And if they do, how they handle the compensation from that pool from the various other jurisdictions may involve revenue that we get. There's quite a discussion about whether or not marijuana should be made legal. We don't know if it's going to happen. Were I in the state legislature, my opinion would matter. Sitting here in the county legislature, government, doesn't matter. But if they do decide to open up that's a revenue stream that we as a county government would expect to see. and we'll discuss whether that's a permanent revenue stream and what that would look like. We have discussed, and we are pursuing, whether red light cameras represent a revenue stream. Red light camera authorization that has already been given and already operative in the city of Mount Vernon, in the city of New Rochelle, in the city of White Plains, the city of Yonkers, city of New York, County Nassau, County Suffolk. Westchester County would be looking only for parity to those jurisdictions around us. And we will have those conversations with our state legislative colleagues to see what happens. When the state authorized Uber and Lyft back in to go effect in the summer of 17, there was no provisions made for county governments to receive any revenue from that discussion. And that dialogue will reopen because the county has responsibility in this area of transportation management, and a revenue stream to go with it from Uber and Lyft seems to be logical, particularly as they're growing in market share in that particular area over taxis and limousines. So all of those things, in addition to the discussion about raising the rate on sales tax, are all possible areas of revenue, and it would be foolish for any of us to speculate which one will be approved. What you can be sure of is we will engage immediately those conversations with our state delegation to determine how they view us moving forward, and we will do that between the board and the executive branch together, and whatever revenue we can achieve, we will strive to achieve, because we recognize that property taxes are the tax that people are most concerned about. We want to use the property tax as least as possible to fund this government, and it's the non-property tax revenue streams that I've just discussed that give us that potential and that opportunity for the future. And as we talk about how the bond rating agencies looked at us, they scored us when they lowered us. Now remember, we weren't lowered from AAA to junk bonds. We were lowered from AAA to AA1, which is still the second highest bond rating you can have and is still favorable compared to most every other jurisdiction around. So the lowering of the bond rating was not fatal by any means. In fact, there was a bond issuance a week before last, and all three bonds that we had out there, set series of bonds, A, B, and C, were gobbled up pretty fast out on the marketplace. So, but what is important for us to understand is that the rating agencies look at us to see how we're handling certain key things. One of them is at the level of our fund balance, and we all agree our fund balance is too low. It's been tapped into in the last number of years out of necessity. We need to restaff that money. We need to get it back up to a reasonable level. And we can't do that just on a 2% property tax increase every year. And we're not going to do it 5 and 7 and 8, 10% property taxes. So if we do it, we're going to have to do it with non-property tax revenue, and that's another reason for the dialogue that we'll have with the state. And we hope that our friends of the state can see their way clear to help us out. That will affect our bond rating and turn that situation around, one of the other criticisms. There are a number of proposals that are out there. What we do with the North 60, as I've talked to members of the press who've recently done stories on it, we are working with the developer. There's no slow walking going on here, but there is due diligence. These 60 acres represent the last area of county non-parkland owned land, and we're prepared to commit it on a long-term basis because we believe there's a viability in biotech as a growth factor, and there would be revenue the county would receive from that, but we must do our due diligence before we finalize it. The prior county board signed a lease under a certain set of circumstances. Those circumstances have changed. I think the board deserves the right to look at what the changes are and be able to debate and make sure they're comfortable with those changes are, and then we go forward. And we're prepared to move forward on that. So any criticism of the progress we're making on North 60, I just treat as not accurate given where we are in these things. So, final point to make on all of this as we go forward. In this budget, we have tried to do a number of things that we think are important. We have tried not only to meet the property tax cap and stay below the property tax cap, we have in this budget funded the bulk of our pension costs for this current year directly without bonding it. There's an element of bonding available to us in it, but the bulk of it, the $83 million that's put in this budget, is meant to pay as we go the pension costs that we believe will be what will be required to pay when the letter comes down from the state controller. We implement the Raise the Age program. And trust me, that is not a no-brainer. There are counties all over the state right now that are struggling to implement Raise the Age. They're well behind. We've been contacted by counties as substantial as Nassau and Suffolk to give them a helping hand because they're not there yet, because that's how far ahead we are. This budget implements that, and that's an important implementation. This budget, for the first time in nearly a decade, puts additional money into some of the services that are provided to us by nonprofit organizations. They have gone through years of having to defend their allocations, having been cut and come back and fight for it just to get back to level. We're being cut with no ability to restore it. That is not what happened here. And the proof of the pudding, and I know a couple of the speakers in your discussion downstairs highlighted this, that was apparent in the number of speakers at your public hearings. Normally those public hearings are 3-hour affairs, 4-hour affairs with hosts of people coming in. Don't cut this $50,000 out of this program. And we didn't do any of that. And would we have done better? Well, if we have additional revenue, we will, but not because we're giving away free money, because these nonprofits provide a service in the same way that we contract with corporations, because they have an expertise that we don't have in-house, and that's why we go external to do certain things. That is the same reason why we go externally with not-for-profit organizations. So this is not charity, this is not member item money, this is money invested in services that tie into the core responsibilities of county government. We were able together, with your help and with our original effort, to add 2% to those numbers, and as revenue allows us and as the services are necessary, we intend to continue to do that. We don't know what the future is going to hold for the SALT deduction. We don't know how it's going to affect individuals yet. We know that for some people it's going to be devastating. But let it be understood that each level of government and each decision maker stands up for the public policies that they adopt. Those of us here in the county government did not adopt the SALT deduction elimination. That was adopted by those elected officials in Washington, D.C., who operated under a different philosophy. And if these philosophies and this plan winds up hurting Westchester residents, then the attention and the negativity has to go to the people who got rid of that deduction, who determined that that was good public policy. And I say that because it is not realistic to think that we can slash county government, mandated as we are to provide certain services, to satisfy a misdirected federal government. And that's what it is. It's misdirected federal government policies. And we certainly aren't going to be able to undo what the federal government has done. The federal government is going to have to undo. And if we need new decision makers in Washington, then that's what we need in order to undo foolish policy. We are trying to run this county government as best as we can within the parameters that we've been given. With those thoughts in mind, I want to invite both Ken and Joan to share any thoughts that they have. Then I'm going to invite Chairman Ben Boykin and Budget Appropriations Chair Catherine Borgia to comment, and then we'll open it up to questions for any of us. Ken.
Thank you, County Executive. I just wanted to take a few moments just to do a few other things. One is, from the County Executive's leadership in the particular budget process, we had some unprecedented things take place during this budget cycle. I've been the legislator. I was a legislator for 10 years, and I'm still a recovering legislator, as I like to point out to individuals along the way, that this was the first time ever that the county executive went out to hear people before the budget process actually started. So we went out to the community to listen to the communities, both in the northern part of Westchester, southern part of Westchester, to be able to get input from those various organizations, and people took advantage of that. They sent their information in, as well as to participate. This budget, I mean, I was in the budget under both kinds of administrations, with a Democrat as county executive, as a Republican as county executive. The budget never went down to the Board of Legislators with the additions that they traditionally had in it. Those were always cut out. So the Board of Legislators always had the job of adding in those miscellaneous budget items for several of the organizations that needed to be accomplished, whether it was for childcare, whether it was for other non-for-profit services. And that didn't happen this year, to make sure that the county budget, that those funds that were traditionally given to those organizations were put in there. And as county executive said, it's been 10 years since there were additions to those numbers for those not-for-profits. And that means that they were really being cut. So if there's a cost of living increase every year, if you hold those numbers flat, it is a cut to those organizations. And as county executive pointed out, those organizations provide valuable partnerships to Westchester County, providing services at cost that we just can't frankly do in the county government, and providing those services that are essential to the people of Westchester. There were all those kind of things done, which it seems like it's easy. It seems like there's not a lot of things going on. But quite honestly, I know all of the folks that were on the Board of Legislators from November 9th, and prior to that, under Chairwoman Borgia's leadership on the budget and appropriations, looking at the expenditures of things going along, and then going through the very diligent process of going line by line through every organization to make sure those things happen. Those things don't happen alone, and I wanted to finally just take a moment to shout out all of the staff members from around the county, from the various departments, because again, there was unprecedented access. And again, I was a person that was used to maybe fighting just a little bit. You might have heard some stories, well, okay, all right, about that. To be able to get the information that was necessary to make sure that we were able to do our jobs appropriately. The legislature had unprecedented access. You didn't have to ask 20 people to get information and then have it filtered out and then sent to you in spoon-fed mechanisms. You didn't have to have legislator Shimsky standing up and saying on the floor of the legislature that they were recommitting an item because you didn't get the information that you asked for in order to move something that was important for the safety and security of the people of Westchester forward. That is a tremendous change, but it is not something that everyone's singing from the same hymnal or Bible or whatever particular religious background that you have. It is really more of a matter of people allowed to do the work that they have to do. And again, the staff members are the ones that make that happen, whether again on the Board of Legislators, whether it's around the county, making sure that everything seems like the trains are running on time. That only happens because of the hard work of everyone. So again, I want to thank everyone for the participation in the process. It was a difficult, time-consuming, late-night process that that we were here until after midnight on Ads Day. A lot of times, again, you would have many, many more people waiting in the wings to see what was going to happen. But because of the transparency, because of the county executive's vision, and again, because of all the hard work of the Board of Legislators, it's what makes things happen. So again, this is a good day, not just because the Jets and the Giants won, all right? Although that's a good thing. But it's also a good day because, again, for the people of Westchester, things are transparent and moving forward. Thanks a lot, County Executive.
Joe McDowell?
Good afternoon, everybody. I don't have too much to add. I just want to echo what both the county executive and the deputy county executive said about the day-to-day operations. And really, even though the actual budget process begins in August when the line departments submit their budgets to our budget division, and there's an iterative process, and then we submitted the budget on November 9th to the Board of Legislators. That's the public dialogue on the budget. The budget process really starts and ends on January 1st through December 31st. And some of the measures that the county executive put in place right from day one, which was we have to deal with some of the issues that we inherited, but we still have to run government day in and day out. And I think George's emphasis on those services that as county residents we take for granted can't be taken for granted. And county department commissioners and directors have made it work over the last several years, and we're getting back on solid footing. And that is a tribute to George's leadership and to everybody that works for this county and the Board of Legislators. And I am proud to be part of that, and now we will continue to move that forward and make good things happen in the county. Thanks.
I'd like to invite Chairman of the Board, Ben Boykin, to share some thoughts.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to the county executive, the deputy county executive, director of operations. The people of Westchester won today. This is a budget that will move us forward to begin the process of rebuilding our finances, in adding to our fund balance, and continuing to provide the essential services that the people of Westchester County need and want and must have. What we're trying to do here is to make sure that we provide for public safety, health, mental health, to protect those that can't help themselves, the safety net, to take care of our park systems, to take care of our seniors, to take care of our youth. This is the priorities of the county government of Westchester County. And I'm glad we're continuing that process and beginning the process of stabilizing our finances. Because if we don't stabilize the county's finances, there's not going to be anything for anyone. So this builds the bridge to a better and brighter financial future for all of us. And let me say, it's been a pleasure for this Board of Legislators to work with the county executive and his team. I've been here 5 years, and it's been a very antagonistic between the 8th and the 9th floor. Whether you were Democrat or whether you were Republican, there was the county executive, and then it was simply the Board of Legislators. That has been changed and turned where we all work together. The transparency is here. And yes, we call on a commissioner and want information, we get information. Because you need information to understand exactly what's going on. You need information for transparency. You need information to make the appropriate and correct decisions. This budget doesn't do it all, but it clearly sets us on the right path where we want to go. And we've done the budget without dipping into the fund balance for 2019. Because obviously that's one of the things that the rating agencies clearly look at. We've used $70 million of this county's fund balance in the last 2 years. We're going to end the year with about $69 to $70 million of fund balance. On a $1,940 million budget, that is not a lot of money in your rainy day funds. We've got to rebuild that, and that's what we're beginning to do. The $23 million for the parking lot, it's a parking lot today, it's going to be a parking lot tomorrow, and if it gets transferred from one governmental entity to another government entity, it's still going to be a parking lot. We look forward to working with the county executive as we move forward to talk to our friends in Albany to seek new revenue sources that will help us continue to move Westchester forward. And let me say that we all work together at the Board of Legislators and with the county executive team. And again, I must commend Catherine Bourgeois, the chair of Budget and Appropriations. I said earlier this year that over the next several years, just about everything that we do is underpinned by the financial situation of this county. We may want to do things, we simply cannot do it because we don't have the money. To the Majority Leader, Catherine Parker, we have a diverse caucus with numerous opinions, sometimes different philosophies. She did an outstanding job of managing the caucus process. The Vice Chair of the Board, Frida Williams, brings that thoughtfulness, that wisdom that she has, her understanding of nonprofits. And of course, the Majority Whip, knows about public works, those bridges, those roads, the infrastructure, the buildings are falling down. So we have a board that understands the issues, works together. And working with the county attorney and his staff, with the budget, Larry Soul said he was getting ready to go home at 5 o'clock Friday. Larry, we need you here to come up and talk to us about an issue. We thought we were going to be in caucus 35, 40 minutes. 3.5 hours, we still in caucus, coming together and getting to where we wanted to be and then coming up with Delete's memo. So it is a day for Westchester County because the people of Westchester County won. And I'm very proud to say I'm glad to have this budget done. Thank you very much. Yes, we have obviously we've just been joined by Legislator Chris Johnson and Legislator Terry Clemens. We have obviously the Vice Chair of the Board, Frida Williams, the Majority Leader, Catherine Parker, the BNA Chair, Catherine Bourgeois, and the Majority Whip, Mary Jane Shimsky. Do we have any other legislators here? I don't see it. And we have staff. We've got Greg. I'm standing over Greg. Greg, when we got those numbers, trying to get that done, And we got the Chief of Staff, Dennis Powell. We've got Jason Travokas, who's our media specialist, making sure that we have the right information out when we're meeting with the media, talking to the media and all. Our clerk's office, oops, we need to do this. I don't think we can do this exactly this way. Keeping us grounded, keeping us focused on what we need to do, and all the other staff people that we have with us are here today. It's been a team effort. I see Ali Razantano and Tina Lamango, who are the co-chairs of the budget committee. Just let me say, they start in June looking for locations. Where are we going to go this year? You know, figuring that out. And then there for the many public hearings, they're here for all the public hearings, and then all the B&A. Because just about everything that comes through the board ultimately ends up going through the Budget and Appropriations Committee. Because that's finance is about a lot of the budget and all. So we want to really thank all of our staff that's here. They work so hard and they do so much great work because they're the ones who make sure that the ship runs, the trains run on time, and we get to where we got to go. So let me say to the staff of the County Board of Legislators, thank you, thank you, thank you.
And then finally, the chair of our Budget and Appropriations Committee, as they once said about James Brown, the hardest working man in the show. I bet you never been compared to James Brown before. Catherine Borgia.
It's kind of cool, though. I like it. So I don't have too much to add. A lot of this has already been said, but I did want to particularly shout out a couple of thank yous to Ali Restiano and Tina Lamango. As the chairman mentioned, they keep the Budget and Appropriations Committee running all year. This is kind of like the last push this last month, but we work hard all year, and they make sure that the things that need to happen to keep this county operating do happen. I also wanted to thank our legislative director, Melanie Montalto, although she's not here with us. She's another one who really she is. I didn't. She keeps the trains running at the Board of Legislators quite a bit. So as you've heard already, this is a budget that starts to right the ship. It is the first of many years where we will have to make some hard decisions and do some things that will help to regain the financial solvency of Westchester County and put us in the position where we always had traditionally been of being a county that looks hard at problems that some other counties find intractable and finds good solutions to them. I'm very pleased to be part of the team that worked together. And I would like to echo something that everyone in the administration said, which is that the tone of this year, throughout the whole year, has been one of cooperation, and that really has made all the difference. It's made us able to think more deeply about things, more comprehensively about things, because we haven't had to struggle, as was mentioned by the Deputy County Executive, to get all the information we needed to make good decisions together, collaboratively. So I want to thank everyone involved in this process. I look forward to 2019 being another really transformational year for Westchester County, and we'll all be working hard to make it happen. So thank you to everyone involved. Thank you all for being here today, and this is the first step of the future of Westchester County, which is bright. So thank you very much.
So we're going to open it up to questions, then I'm going to sit down, sign the bill. I'll invite all the members of the Board of Legislators to stand behind me when we do the official signature. So opening up to the press. Any comments, any questions anybody has? Okay, David, and then we'll go to Jonathan.
Yes, I have a question regarding the parking lot, which I've written about, and the selling off of the 14 acres of parkland. And you mentioned in your talk there that you talked about going to Albany to seek alienation of the parkland. Have you changed your position on this? Do you now believe that the parkland needs alienation?
Well, keep in mind that the position that we've taken is that the enabling legislation that would accomplish this could be done in a number of different fashions. We've identified at least 2, maybe 3 different ways it could be done. The traditional way involves alienation, and I referenced it in my general comments. John Nona had done some research and showed that there might be a second way to go, and I know that upset a number of people because of the policy implications of it. But what I've said, and I think I've been consistent with here, is that we will act on that proposal beginning sometime around July 1st if we need to. If we have revenue and we do not need to do that, we can cover the $23 million in some other fashion through other agreed upon revenues, then we won't activate that. And when we do activate it, we'll need to put together enabling legislation that will require the Board of Legislators' approval. They'll have a chance to vote, discuss, diagram exactly what they want to see in that law. If we do go the route of alienation, that will have to be accomplished prior to the end of the legislative session. Usually alienation bills are not that controversial. This one might be, I guess. But in the process of doing that, that's something that could be done very late in the legislative session if it looks like additional revenue is not coming our way. And so we'd have to have that accomplished by the end of June. So the alienation provision would be in and would leave the option open for the board and for the administration to use whichever route was best. I'm not looking to create a firestorm over this, but I do believe that that the transfer through sales is, and we obviously have had a disagreement quite publicly about it. But nonetheless, I think that I've been as flexible as I can be of indicating don't have to do it if we have the revenue. If we have to do it, there's a couple of different ways we can do it. If, in fact, we do decide that we have to go in that direction, it's going to be a dialogue with the legislature. You've heard me talk about doing this across the aisle as well, so that both sides of the aisle are included in the process. And, I don't think that changes any position. In fact, what I've described as an attitude is the attitude I've had for 30 years in public office. Inclusion, dialogue, and obviously I, as you do, support my position very strongly. But that doesn't mean we won't agree on the next issue, David. Jonathan.
You sort of touched upon it, but let's just say there are complications with this parking lot. What is your confidence level that there will be other revenue sources that you'll be able to get from the state that will be able to complete it?
Well, I'm reasonably confident because there are so many different avenues. If there was one avenue and that was the only avenue we're pursuing, then I would be more concerned because it would come down to a singular decision. But and no one can predict what the new configuration of the legislature is going to do. I do know that Andrea Stewart-Cousins, as head of the Senate, knows Westchester County government and government needs very well. So it isn't as if I have to go out to Long Island and convince John Flanagan in a different political party that we have certain needs and make a defense. But we have to make a proactive defense for the reasons for any of these revenue streams. And I believe we can make that proactive defense. In fact, we're going to meet in the next couple of days to identify the different revenue streams. We've had some dialogue on the Assembly side that they've triggered. We'll have some dialogue on the Senate side. We're going to have dialogue with the administration, the governor, because he's the ball game up there as well. And then we'll see where we stand. But I've learned from my 13 years in Albany, do not try to predict. Figure out what you're going to do, work hard and do it, and then see what happens when you're finished with the process. You're certainly, going to be interviewing us all along the way, and you'll be getting update reports as we get them. Hopefully the news will be good. Other questions from any other source? Going once? Going twice? Okay. If that's, if we're satisfied, I'd invite my colleagues to join me as we sign this into law. Closer, so we're all in the shot. You can probably step up to about here, I think. I want to thank Sunday Vanderberg and her team for efficiently having this up to us so quickly. I know it ain't that easy. This is Act number 216 of 2018, and it includes all of the different component pieces of the budget for the year 2019. This has been passed by a vote of 13-4 by the Board of Legislators, and on this day, the 10th day of December, 2018, I'm pleased to sign it, thereby making it in effect. And I know we have crummy pens. I promise better pens next year. Catherine Borgia.
You get the pen. You get the pen.
Thank you. We have a budget on time and balanced. Oh, did we not? We did not. Catherine advised me we did not put an ad in the budget for new pens. So. Just one more statement, and then we'll all depart. We all have our busy schedules tonight. I know for the board, which won't be meeting or doesn't plan to meet before the end of the year, we'll try not to give you a reason to have to meet. We wish you a very Merry Christmas and a very joyous Kwanzaa. Hopefully you've had a good, happy Hanukkah. Tonight I've got a couple of stops in a couple of different places, but the last stop I'm going to make tonight, I'm going to drive back into the south side of Mount Vernon, and I'm going to go down the street that I grew up on, and I'm going to look at that little house, and I'm going to be thankful that I was born in this county and that I've now had a chance to help this county in a kind of concrete way.